No, John, for the 37th time, you may not roll to seduce the ogre. It is currently trying to eat you. Hey there, kids. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Franklin, that you are having a great day. And in today's video, I want you guys to sit back, chillax with me, and listen along as I do some rambling about Dungeons and Dragons. You see, today, more and more often lately, but today especially, I was taking a peek at my old one of 4 copies of the 3rd edition Player's Handbook, because I have 4 of these for some reason. And I've just been thinking about, of all the D&D editions that have been on the market, 3rd edition is still easily my favorite. I love it so much. I love everything it did for the game overall. And how, for me and for a lot of people especially, it was kind of the foundational edition of Dungeons and Dragons. And this is kind of a somber take too, because I don't actually play 3rd edition a whole lot anymore. It's in fact been over a year now that I can think of, probably over a year, close to a year, since I last played an actual game of 3rd edition. It's mostly been Pathfinder, and I know for most people, Pathfinder just feels like D&D 3.75. And for me too, I do hold that opinion that Pathfinder is basically just a continuation of 3rd edition with some new classes, some rule changes here and there, but, it's just not quite the same. I mean, Pathfinder is good, don't get me wrong. I do enjoy Pathfinder a lot, but there's just something about this aesthetic, the fact that the player's handbook looks like an actual, like, mystic tome right from the get-go, that marked this as something different compared to the images of battle seen on some of the other editions of D&D and Pathfinder in general. And it's not like I wouldn't say I hate other editions of D&D. It's just that for me, 3rd edition is what I started with. And as I worked both backwards and forwards from it, I found that there were things in it that I liked more than in other editions. And, it really does feel like once upon a time, Wizards of the Coast captured lightning in a bottle when it came to this edition. Because, for those of you who don't know, prior to the creation of 3rd edition, which happened in the year 2000, Wizards of the Coast was not the company that owned and operated Dungeons and Dragons. That was actually by TSR, the company Gary Gygax helped to set up and sort of run. He wasn't all that involved towards the end. But, after its growing success and some hiccups along the way, eventually TSR ended up being sold and was wound up into Wizards of the Coast, and that's where 3rd edition came from after a lot of D&D changes over about 20 years. And they did a lot. 3rd edition was a very streamlined edition. They streamlined how classes worked in terms of the level system. All the levels were not necessarily made equal, but streamlined so that you could level up in one class and then level up into another class if you wanted to, and then you would feel a kind of natural progression across all classes. Not all classes were made equal. Let's acknowledge that right here and now. But, for their first stint in terms of balance, I think Wizards of the Coast did a pretty good job. They introduced the feat system. They didn't necessarily introduce the skill system, but they did streamline it as well, so that skills actually were something noteworthy in the game. The feats were a really big thing, in my opinion, especially working backwards. Because again, 3rd edition was what I started with, so imagine my shock going into the older editions and not having access to some of the streamlined things that I had taken for granted up to that point. The big change that they made, in my opinion, was that in earlier editions of D&D, the 1st edition, 2nd edition, Advance, all that jazz, it was a D20 system, just like later editions, but to hit monsters, you were trying to get lower numbers, which always still kind of drives me up the wall. Thaco is a weird AC determining number. I liked how they streamlined it so that instead of trying to get small, or it's not necessarily trying to get small numbers, but it's a complicated mess. There's other channels on YouTube that could explain THAC0 and the older D&D dice system better, but what Wizards of the Coast did was they streamlined the D20 system, made it easier, and that's kind of the word of the day, isn't it? Streamlined. A lot of things about 3rd edition were streamlined, and I know I'm doing a terrible job of explaining it, but if you look at some of the older editions of D&D, especially AD&D, you know, everything is really, I don't want to say fluff heavy, but it's definitely rules light, where a lot of mechanics, a lot of player actions, a lot of the action economy is kind of left up to interpretation. 3rd edition does away with a lot of that, where a lot of the rules are more hard-coded, spells are a bit more well-defined, actions are more well-defined, and a lot of the game world is not necessarily better fleshed out, but more, it's given more structure for the players and the game master to interact with. And I really like that. I really like the plethora of options given to players in 3rd edition, because there's not just the core classes, the core races, but there's a bunch of extra classes, prestige classes, all sorts of modifiers for not just what you can play as a fighter or a wizard or a rogue or whatever, but, you know, the feats really modify what you're allowed to play with and as. There's all sorts of extra rules for monster classes, for instance, and ways to level up even NPCs and all kinds of cool stuff. Really, it's really crazy how much in its time was jammed into 3rd edition. And, you know, just looking back with, you know, regards to this very simple player's handbook, 3rd edition is, in my opinion, the best edition of Dungeons and Dragons. And I know that there's going to be people who disagree with me massively on a variety of things, but, you know, insofar as I'm concerned, 3rd edition is just the best in terms of options, which I always love. I really love the sheer variety given to players of 3rd edition, 3.5, whatever have you, in that there's just so much customization. You can have wildly different characters even within the same generic looking team roles. Like, you can have a human fighter who is radically different from player to player. You can have an elvish wizard who is radically different from player to player, and it's great. Some of the weirder side classes basically have to play the same because they're so niche. Looking at you, Shadowcaster, but for the most part, there's a lot of variety, and that's kind of what I like most about 3rd edition, is the sheer volume of choice, which I always felt like we didn't get that in later editions. I really don't like 4th edition. I've said that before, and I'll say it a bazillion times. 4th edition, not a fan. I'm not much of a fan of 5th edition, but it's less to do originally. Originally, when I gave my first judgment opinion on 5th edition, back when it was, wow, 5th edition was a long time ago, wasn't it? 5th edition came out a very long time ago. When I first formed my opinion on 5th edition, it was basically that I felt that there weren't enough options for players just to really customize what they were doing. And that opinion is still the same. But nowadays, my big gripe with 5th edition is not that it's not really diverse as 3rd edition. It's that the game itself feels really neutered. You know, it really feels like 5th edition is not for people who grew up with 3rd edition. It feels like, I don't know, feels less substantial. I don't know. I'm not really sure how to describe it without, like, breaking into a tirade, and that's not what this is here for. I'm just, you know, this is just another video of me rambling on about how much I enjoy a particular thing, and I really gotta say that I wish I could grab my Pathfinder players, for instance, and glue them to 3rd edition and just force them to play that, but, you know, it is what it is. I would like to get some more 3rd edition games going sometime. It's such a fun system. But yeah, no, this is just a video of me fondly reminiscing about the past, I suppose. I had a lot of really fun 3rd edition characters under my belt over the years. Some have died pretty horribly. Some have had pretty epic adventures. But for the most part, it's just been a really enjoyable time. And where I suppose this video can go in terms of, actual substantial things is, I know Wizards of the Coast wants to get more people onto their digital D&D platform. And I think an excellent way to do that would be if they were to offer digital editions of older rulebooks. 4th edition, 3rd edition, advanced D&D, etc. I know that Wizards wants to try and funnel all players into the newest edition because they're stupid or something. I don't know. But I think it'd be great if, like, a great incentive to older players, especially to use your new digital platform, would be if you made the older rulebooks available. The 3rd edition's a huge part of that. So that's really all I've got. This was another ramble video. Not really something substantial. But I suppose I will return to chatting about TCGs in the near future. Somebody had mentioned that they want to hear me ramble about Union Arena. So I suppose I can do a breakdown of that in the near future. I thought I grabbed some Union Arena stuff a while back, but I guess I was wrong. I thought I had some lying around. I can always pick some up, though. Oh, wait, no, I did. I picked up Bleach. I picked up some Bleach Union Arena stuff because it was at my local card shop once. Yeah, so that's coming in the future at some point. But thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you kids in the next one.